Well, welcome back to another dispatch from Holly McKay. This isn't so much a dispatch today as it is a discussion of the heart. Um,
Personal updates.
yeah, pretty much. So, Holly, you just wrote a wonderful article about the loss of a very early stage loss of pregnancy of yours, and very brave of you to share it, by the way, and very touching. Um, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that today because this is an issue that touches very, very many people, and it doesn't get talked about as openly as it should. And I just want to expand on that a little bit more.
Mm.
I remember how excited you were when you found out that you were pregnant with a second child, and big smiles, very pensive, because you never know. And unfortunately, the pensiveness turned into reality. So talk a little bit about that for a minute.
Yeah, I wanted to write about this, to talk about it because it is something that it happens a lot. I would say at least half of my girlfriends have experienced a pregnancy loss. And while it's very common, there is still sort of so much stigma and taboo around it, and this idea that we can't tell anyone until we're pregnant, until, second trimester or whatever that may be. And I do think, if you do go through something like this, that is a time when you do need the support of other people, or not to feel sort of so isolated and alone. And that's why it was something I wanted to write about. It was very hard to write about it, obviously, because um, it's such a raw and such a personal thing, and it's always very difficult for me to write and speak about personal things when my life was really centered around telling the stories of other people, and um, kind of sharing a little bit more of myself is very difficult. But this I wanted to sort of explore it a little bit more because it's such a unique grief, because you are sort of mourning the loss of something that you'd already calculated, you'd already dreamed of, and in my case, something that we'd wanted and planned for a long time, and it did sort of take a long time to happen, and then when it finally did, you know your life immediately pivots and your life immediately shifts, and um you start planning something that's a very different life for yourself. And when that is is kind of taken away, it's this grief of the sadness of mourning that, but it's also, I know with me there was so much guilt to my grief, because obviously every day I'm dealing with people who are, losing children, or going through things that, or losing pregnancies much further along, and they're going through things that um from the outset are much worse than this. But at the same time, experiencing a pregnancy loss is is such a traumatic thing, because you do feel as though um, your body has betrayed you in some way. And as much as everybody says don't blame yourself, it's not your fault, of course you still do blame yourself. And I still do that, even though, you know, I can maybe say, technically I know it's not my fault, but there are certainly still things that I question and I ask, um, just about sort of my own path in life. Um, and there's such a recovery from something like this. And even though I was only, a couple of months pregnant, I was going into my 10th week of pregnancy, but even though um I was fairly early along, um, it's still, something I'm still very much recovering from. That it's going to take, quite a significant amount of time, I think, to feel like myself again. And I wanted to talk about this sort of in between because so much of what we see or read or understand about pregnancy loss is usually becomes a footnote to maybe a happier story, where somebody gets pregnant again, it's a viable pregnancy, and they talk about the miscarriage or the miscarriages that they previously had. And I didn't want this just to become a footnote of maybe a more optimistic story, because right now, when you're in it, it's something that's very raw and very difficult. And I think that there needs to be a conversation a little bit around that, not just um, the next time around.
Yeah. So, um, you know, so it's clearly very, very personal and actually biological, right? Because your body in many ways still thinks it's pregnant and still has hormones and things like that that are in it. That takes a while to come back out. So, then and that has to add to the I I I can only relate from the point of uh caring about it because to my knowledge we never had a failed pregnancy in well, I'm pretty sure we didn't. So we had difficult ones but not but n never any failed ones. So I can't actually relate to the personal feelings that are going through that, but this affects you. It affects Ryan. It affects your family, your friends, whatever. Um, and um, I don't know the extent to which it affects your daughter, but um, it really still orbits around what's going on deep inside of you as far as where you are. Does it help to chronicle the journey, or does it make it worse?
Yeah, it does for me. Writing is a real outlet for me. I think that's always been the case since I was a child. That writing is something very healing for me. To write about experiences and personal experiences and um, being able to capture the moment in that way, that is definitely something that I find it incredibly helpful.
Yeah. Well, so the article that you published it's kind of what, second generation version of it, because you sent me a draft of one very, very early in this, and it was very, very raw. It basically ended with your feelings for uh this baby that you would never meet, and you actually gave the baby a name, and which is part of the grieving process, that this is a human being that you were grieving for. Um, how have you changed since the first moment? I mean, I think you texted me, no pulse, right?
Or no heartbeat. It's what they call
Yeah,
a
no heartbeat. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
miscarriage. Yeah,
That
so
that day.
there's no like, giant blood gushing that, can often happen in these circumstances. This is a case where you go, for a routine ultrasound and there's no heartbeat and, the baby's measuring a little bit behind and it's pretty evident that the development has stopped, which is very cruel in the sense that your body is still thinks it's pregnant. So your HCG, which is the pregnancy hormone, that's still rising. You're still having, different pregnancy symptoms. For some women, that's a lot of nausea, um, whatever that may be, sore breasts, fatigue, all sorts of things that you experience in that first trimester. For me, just these incredibly vivid dreams. That's something that went on for a really long time. Um, and so, yeah, it's sort of this sort of cruelty, I guess, of um, your body still thinks it's pregnant all the while, the pregnancy is no longer viable. So, um, it's a very strange feeling, and it was something that I knew quite a bit about. I think that I sort of knew what it was, but really with this pregnancy, I do think there is so much to a mother's intuition in that I felt, even though I had no reason to feel um, anything was off, I think once those sort of first, a little bit of euphoria wears off, I started to just feel just a lot of dread for no reason. And I, again, I think there is just an inner knowing. And so I did a lot of research, about, and I think I was trying to find reassurance for myself that it was okay. I think all the while, my team of light was, preparing me for what was going to eventually happen. And so I am grateful for that because I did feel a little bit armed, in that doctor's appointment, um, in that I knew what decisions that I wanted to make, and I knew um, what questions that I needed to ask. And I think if I'd gone in there without any knowledge of this, it may have been even more sort of shocking than it was. But um, yeah, having said that, it's just that awful experience. And when you have had a child before, a healthy child, and what that ultrasound, is like, and sort of the excitement that comes from that in the photos, and this just, yeah, it was a very different experience, and I think not well handled, or as well, and in the sense that I just found that it was sort of a little bit dismissed, I think, by the sonographer. I know in talking to other women that have experienced it, where the nurse has, immediately gone to get the doctor to kind of talk to you. I felt that, I ended up sitting in that room basically by myself for 40 minutes, waiting for someone to come in, kind of processing this and knowing this even before the doctor had come in. So I do think that it wasn't handled well, unfortunately. I think that that was very traumatic for me in that way, and that certainly going forward, um, I will be going about, my early care in a different way to ensure that, an experience like that doesn't happen again.
Mm, yeah. So having shared this with the world, oop, sorry, um, having shared this with the world, what's the reaction? I mean, I mean, you shared it with your closest friends, of course, but now you shared it with a much broader audience, and uh, that have clearly run into more people that have also had this experience. Are you finding that that helps?
I find it, yes, I do find that it helps only because um, I sort of felt like I, yeah, I sort of felt like I was kind of carting around this secret that I felt, um, should be shared or should be talked about. And and maybe it was a little bit of self-preservation. Again, I don't know who reads the Substack and who doesn't, but I also just didn't want people continually asking me questions about when I would have a second baby or why I wasn't having a second baby yet or whatever that may be. And so I felt like just in writing this that I was almost just letting some of that go a little bit, or I could just refer people to that without having to kind of go through, and justify myself or something in any way. And I think that just goes to show, and we all do this, I think unintentionally, myself included, when we ask people, when are you having a baby, or when are you having another baby, or do you want just one, or do you want more, or we don't know the backstory of what that person or that couple has gone through. And I just think it's something to be a little bit mindful of, because that can be a very triggering question for a lot of people that we sort of, most of us think is quite benign, but it can be a very painful question. So I also think that that's something just to be mindful of, going forward in our interactions, that I think it's never our business to ask somebody about their family planning purposes, because um again, we just don't know what they've been through or what they're currently going through. And even, I took my daughter to the pool that we have here in our condo complex, and there was parents that were also in the baby pool, and they had two young girls. I think one was 4, one was 2.5, and the younger one was very adventurous. And sort of the dad said to me, "Well, if you had another one, you would see how adventurous they are. The younger one is always more adventurous because they look up to the older sibling, but you have to have another one to see that." And again, he didn't mean it in a the way that maybe it came across, but for me, that was such a gut punch. I was just like, and this is when I'm going through it. Um, and so I was just, yeah, I was like, oh, and I didn't know this person, so I wasn't going to kind of go into my personal life, but in my head, I just wanted to be like, yeah, mate, that's just not what I needed to hear right now, but thanks.
Yeah, well, yeah, I completely get it, because people like to share uh their stories about how this relates to their own experiences. And I made that mistake with you. I started telling you about, like what I had seen and gone through in what Leslie and I had seen and gone through and stuff. And it all of a sudden hit me, I don't know, mid sentence or mid message, that no, that's not the right thing to be talking about right now. The social sensitivity kicked in. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, no, there are certain times, listening with a closer ear and going, "Eh, this is not about sharing the experience, it's about witnessing it." The which And then I smiled because I said to my because I immediately said to myself, and this is what my friend does best. You witness things that are extremely traumatic and are able to maintain that separation that most people can't. And so and I I apologize for like having started to share when the correct thing to do, well, the entire time, was to just listen. Um, and I don't know how many other people have done that to you, but yeah, I completely get where that's coming from. Um,
And
it's
I
difficult
just think,
though, because you don't really
yeah,
know what
I
to
mean,
do. It's
yeah,
awkward.
and there are so many layers to something like this. As I said, not just the sort of emotional the sort of the emotional havoc, I guess. It's a roller coaster. You have moments, that are okay, days that are okay, and then other days that are just not. And there's also very much the biological side of it, which today I'm a month since my DNC. So month since my DNC, and then I guess 5 weeks since I found out. But I have never experienced a even postpartum, with Raven. Um, just sort of a crazy, I would say emotional dump, but just a crazy, um, just yeah, honestly, the craziest kind of ride that I thought that I'd gotten through. And then the last few days were just absolute havoc, where I just think, especially yesterday, I really hit um one of the really low points, I think, and I couldn't pinpoint why. Um, and then just trying to sort of pick myself up from there, trying to figure out how to track my hormones, which is just impossible to do. So I think just things like this that I just didn't know, or I didn't understand, or and everybody is very different. But I think, I thought going for the DNC, it would reset, things a little bit, and I would be back to normal in a couple of weeks, but that definitely hasn't been the reality for me. So that's been really hard, just trying to function, trying to be the full-time carer for my daughter, and we've had a lot of summer travel. We're off again tomorrow. Um, and yeah, just not feeling myself and almost being able to just kind of, as if you're on the outside looking in, and I'm like, what I'm feeling is just not me. It's almost looking at somebody else. And so I think all these things do take time, but I think we're so quick to want to move on from things and to just try to kind of get back to normal. And you're only I think society only gives you this very small grace period, and then you've got to be back in business. And that's just not the case. It's an extremely, I think, challenging experience. At least that's how it's been for me. It's just things that I think that I can move on from very quickly. I actually sort of can't. So yeah, so that's been something that I really didn't have any preparation for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a trauma, probably a lifelong one that will be more manageable over time. But look, I don't blame you, man. I mean, like, what did you call me about yesterday? It's like you couldn't copy and paste something.
No, I was okay then. Yeah, I sort of fell apart
But
later, but yeah.
no, but I've been watching you, you know, you're my friend, right? So and I love you, buddy. It's the whole the ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. You can hear them, the tenor of the voice, um the uh the content of the conversation, the subjects that get brought up or not get brought up. I mean, there are clearly a lot of signs about like where you are on any given day. And so, and I don't want to linger about it for too long because I just to tell you, I think you're dealing with it very, very well. And uh it's not over yet, but it's um I know that when you write, it's cathartic. So I'm very glad that you did it, and I'm very glad that you published it and shared it because that kind of helps unload some of the weight, I think, or hope. Yeah, I
It
mean, you'll tell me
does. It
somewhere
does.
along the way where, just how that actually worked out, in a calmer moment.
Yeah, it does. And yeah, I'm grateful to have that outlet. But yeah, it's also I guess it's been a just a lot of reflection, and I think even before this happened, reflection, and I know I've discussed it with you, just about obviously I've spent my adult life mostly as a war reporter, going to places, you're really prioritizing travel, telling these stories at my own peril, and also at the same time, it's almost a sliding doors moment, I think. I remember in my mid-20s thinking to myself, how much I wanted to have a big family, and how fulfilling that I thought that would be. And so there was certainly that path. And then I ended up down a different path, which was also a huge pull for me at the time that I don't think that I could have not done. And that was going into, my work as a war reporter. Um, but that comes with its own, you're away for most of your life. Dating life was, very arbitrary, very difficult for a long time, in terms of sustainability. And then the years just end up going by. And so there's a part of me that has, some regrets a little bit about, or regrets isn't the right word, but some certainly reflections about whether I made the right choices in going down this life path, what that other life path would have looked like. Have I left it too late, to at least have a second child? All those things, I think, was it worth it? Is it worth it? And I can't say that I have sort of unrelenting answers. I'd like to be able to say, no regrets. It was all an incredible experience, and there is that, but there is another tug where I do look at what a different life would be. And I mean, it's too late, obviously, for that now, but Was it worth it? I don't have a completely convinced answer of that.
Mm, um, well, we'll wrap it up, but uh, I think that's a very wise answer at this stage in what's going on with your life. Um, because you're considering a lot of things. And now, if you want my opinion, it was worth it.
Thank you.
Um, the number of people who you helped, the number of people who you saved, the number of people who you brought attention to that would have been forgotten, is a contribution to humanity on planet Earth that is real, it's tangible, it made a difference. If you had not been there, that would not have happened, and those people would have been lost to the wind. So, um, for that, I'm grateful. And then the fact that you're getting a chance now to um, explore this other aspect of your life, I'm grateful for that too, because you deserve it. But and I understand the questioning. And I hope you write more about that questioning and resolution and as you come to understand the combination of where you've been and where you're going and how that's made you a wiser and better person, which I think you are. So um, um, it's actually been kind of a difficult conversation, to tell you the truth, right? Because at least it was for me. Um, in that we've talked about things like this before, but I don't think we've ever talked about things like this in a recording. And it shows a very human side of you. And I think a very beautiful human side of you.
I do just think on that note, though, maybe as I get older and wiser, when you see it now, I think, or there's this perception maybe that you have to travel the world and see all these places and do all these things, and there's a bucket list almost of life, and not, most people's bucket list is not war zones, but there's certainly, travel is usually a big component of it. um and doing all these things, and I look back and and even in my pre-war days, I think I went to the Oscars 9 times. Probably, every crazy big Hollywood event that I don't even remember much about now. But maybe at the time, or to the outside world, it's a big deal. And then, of course, I've worked in more than 50 countries, all these things. Pluses and minuses, but I think you think that you need a lot of these external things, to sort of live this full life before you settle down, before you have kids. But I do think, um, that people can have just as fulfilling lives, you know, um, with their families. And I just want to add that little plug there, that I think that yeah, mothering gets a bit of a bad rap, as if, your life is over. Um, and I just think we need to kind of reconfigure that a little bit. And I certainly, after having Raven, I felt very much like I had to immediately get back to who I was. And I was so terrified of losing my identity. And I was on that first flight out to Africa. But I just think, in looking back, that 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 we can, there is so much fulfillment, to be had, in being a mom. And I would just like to sort of see that, maybe a little bit reconfigured, a little bit, in the sense of not having to check so many boxes.
Well, if you want my opinion, there is no more honorable and admirable thing to do in this world than to be a mother. It
Yeah,
makes a
and that's
difference for everything that comes
the subject
afterwards.
of my next book that I'm working on, which, again, it's very hard
Yeah,
to get the
exactly.
time, but I'm plugging away. and plugging away. And I also think um, lessons from the universe too is gratitude of appreciating, just what I have and what I have in my daughter, who is just magnificent. And I think I'm someone who's a little bit maybe on the woo-woo side of things, but definitely very spiritual. And I do believe that, if there are, lessons to kind of come from this, it is appreciating what I have in her. And the funny thing with this loss is, um, I think I spoke about it, or I wrote about it earlier this year, and I was actually coming back from a doctor's appointment, discussing my frustrations with not being able to immediately, get pregnant when trying, and that was when Raven and I were in a ride share and ended up in a car accident, where the sort of T-boned the other car, hit the side where Raven was, and at full speed. And it was such a terrifying few seconds trying to process what just happened and realizing the car had hit the side where she was. And just, yeah, in processing that she was okay, first of all. And we were very lucky to walk away from that. But again, my reflection from that was, again, just have gratitude for what you have here. Here was I focusing on, wanting another child, when I think the universe was kind of nudging me to, again, to really show that gratitude for what I already had. And then again, with this loss, that was the lesson that came to my mind as well. Um, it was gratitude again for what I have, and maybe just sitting in that for a while, before, trying to think about what the next steps were.
Mm. Um, that's a very personal journey sharing moment that it sounds even more poignant in your retelling than the day of it, because I remember you were not the happiest camper that day when it actually happened. Um, well, let's do a little this is I'm kind of liking these extemporaneous conversations that we're having on these videos and I think we should do more of them because they bring out a lot more of you and what really makes you tick as far as why you write what you do and how hard you work at it. Um, you said you're working on a book. Let's plug that a little bit in terms of
Yeah, it's
the
going
work
to.
that
I
you're
don't want to give
doing.
too much away yet because it's still very, it's still very rough. But it's a book sort of essentially looking at mothers around the world and in war and conflict. Um, so it's been a labor of love for a long time, and some of it written before being a mom, some of it written as a mom. So it's sort of, I guess, a little bit of my journey entwined in there, but really the stories of incredible mothers that I meet in very challenging circumstances around the world.
Yeah. Well, and with that, an encouragement. Um, there's a lot to see and read in Hollie McKay's Substack. So encourage anyone who sees this video, subscribe to the Substack, um, watch these videos. There's a whole series of them that come out during the course of the year, and there's several years of them going back all the way to Hollie's War Reporter days. And get the paid version of the Substack because that's when you see a lot of the really meaty articles about the world that Holly writes. And with that, I think we'll close it out and say thank you, Holly. This has been an extremely candid sharing moment, and I thank you for it. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Dennis.